Who am I, really? This question sounds simple, and yet it's one of the most difficult questions anyone can ask. We grow up with roles handed to us, absorbing ideas of who we are or who we should be at every step. Each role builds layers piece by piece, defining us in ways we may never even notice. And yet, somewhere in all that, there's something we're missing. Something essential, something we've forgotten. Maybe it's the truest part of ourselves that we lose. The part that doesn't fit neatly into labels, roles, or even thoughts. It's not the identity we've created, but the essence we've forgotten. And I wonder, how do we even begin to reconnect with that essence? The truth is, most of us spend our lives searching, sometimes without even realizing it. We search for purpose. We search for meaning, for happiness. We look in our jobs, our relationships, our possessions, our successes. But in that relentless search, there's always something that slips through our fingers. A faint awareness that none of it feels quite enough. It's like grasping at shadows. The more we try to hold on to an image of who we are, the further we drift from the part of us that simply is. In Sufism, there's a belief that the soul, the real self, is like a hidden treasure. They call it the secret of secrets. It's not something you can understand through knowledge alone. It's not something you can achieve, but something you awaken to, as if waking from a dream. The journey inward, they say, is a journey back to that forgotten self, the essence beneath the many identities we wear. But what does that journey look like? It doesn't begin in some faraway place. It doesn't require anything extraordinary. In fact, it starts in the smallest of moments. When you pause, when you turn away from the noise, when you sit quietly with yourself. It's in the silence that we start to feel the edges blur, where the boundaries of who we think we are begin to dissolve. Imagine standing at the edge of an endless sea, the horizon blurring with the sky. You can't tell where one ends and the other begins. That's how the forgotten self feels. It's something vast, undefined, beyond all concepts. It doesn't fit into any box, any word, any definition. And yet, it's more real than anything we could ever describe. Psychology tells us that the ego, the part of us that identifies as I, is designed to protect us, to give us a sense of control. It's the storyteller within, the one who needs labels, roles, and narratives to feel secure. And so it builds up defenses like walls around a fortress. We wear masks, create identities, play roles. But what if in doing so we're actually building walls that trap us, that isolate us from the vastness of who we truly are? Maybe this forgotten self is not something we can find by looking outward, by adding more to ourselves. It's something we uncover by letting go, by dismantling those walls one by one. Philosophers have spoken about this letting go for centuries. They say the journey isn't about adding more, but about shedding what we aren't. Lao Tzu once said, "To attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, remove things every day." But what are we removing? It's not just ideas or beliefs, it's the attachment to those beliefs, the need to define ourselves through them. We're letting go of everything we cling to as me. As we peel back these layers, we start to see the forgotten self emerge, like a faint light in the darkness. It's a self that exists beyond the mind, beyond the roles we play. But this process isn't easy. It's a process that asks us to step into uncertainty, to embrace the unknown, to surrender control. And that's terrifying. We live in a world that tells us to be certain, to know, to have answers. But the forgotten self thrives in the unknown, in that space of not knowing. It's there that true freedom exists. Not the freedom to be someone, but the freedom to simply be. Have you ever felt that flicker of freedom in a moment of solitude, when you're not trying to be anyone, not trying to prove anything? It might happen in nature, looking at a vast landscape that humbles you, or in a quiet moment at night when everything feels still. In those moments, there's a glimpse of something beyond our usual self, a hint of the forgotten self. But it's a fleeting experience, because as soon as we try to grasp it, to define it, it slips away. This self can't be held onto, it can only be experienced. It's not an identity, it's more like a state of being. Think of this forgotten self as a silent witness, a presence within you that simply observes without judgment, without attachment. It's not trying to control or change anything, it's just there, watching, aware, patient. And in that witnessing, there's a profound peace, a kind of peace that doesn't come from escaping reality, but from fully embracing it, just as it is. In the words of Rumi, beyond right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there. That field is the space of the forgotten self, beyond judgments, beyond definitions. It's a place of pure presence where we can meet ourselves as we truly are. But how do we live from this place? How do we allow the forgotten self to guide us in a world so full of demands, pressures, and roles? The answer isn't about abandoning our roles or rejecting our responsibilities. The forgotten self isn't separate from our everyday life. It's the part of us that can bring presence and depth to whatever we do. Whether we're at work, with loved ones, or alone, we can learn to live from this quiet center, from this unshakable sense of self. To live from the forgotten self is to live without fear of losing ourselves, because we know there's nothing to lose. It's a life of presence rather than possession, of flow rather than control. When we let go of the need to define, to label, to know everything, we allow life to unfold in its own way, trusting that there's something within us that's always there, no matter what. It's in this forgotten self that we find our truest peace. Not a peace that comes from the absence of challenges, but a peace that remains even amidst them. It's the kind of peace that doesn't depend on the external, but arises from within. From a connection to something timeless, boundless, beyond the limits of thought. So as you move through life, I invite you to remember that there's more to you than what you see, more to you than any role you play. There's a part of you that's always been there, silently watching, waiting, a part of you that's whole, complete, untouched by the ever-changing currents of life. And when you touch that part of yourself, even for a moment, you'll know what it means to come home. Not to a place, not to a role, but to the essence of who you are.